Thank you. So the title of my talk is Full Stack Vue.JS. This confuses a lot of people because Vue.JS is a front-end framework, and they wonder, full stack Vue.JS? That's like saying full stack Angular. What I really mean by that is I'm going to present basically a full stack architecture that uses Vue as the front-end framework. And the front-end frameworks tend to get a lot of discussion these days, so that's why I named it thus. Yeah, I used to be a LAMP developer, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. Back in the dark ages, I was probably really active in, like, this isn't even the dark ages, but like around 2011 in that particular area. And I've been meaning to upgrade my skill set to the more modern JavaScript centric stack, and I recently did as a part of the work that we're doing at Knowledge Exploration Systems, the company I have with Mike over there. And I decided that I wanted to make a presentation kind of, giving an overview of the stack as I learned it and some perspectives of the full JavaScript stack from a LAMP developer's perspective. So first we're going to discuss a little bit of about LAMP, what was good about it, what was bad about it. Not too much spending not too much time there, but I did create a nice graphic for that one, so I'll have to talk about that. Also, I forgot to mention, I'm live streaming to my Facebook back there, and I'm recording the presentation on my laptop. So I'm going to combine the two and make a video out of it, and I'll put it wherever you guys can access it. So you'll have access to all this and the repo that's associated with this as well. You'll have all that information. Then I'm going to talk about the MEVN stack. That represents Mongo, Express, Vue, and Node. With these technologies, we can basically build super robust, modern web-based applications. I'm going to talk about cloud computing a little bit and how it gels very well with this stack. I'm going to talk about Vue, obviously, and some basics of Vue. And those of you that come from a React background, you'll find it very similar. The model they're inspired by it. Then I'll just talk about briefly some supporting tools that we may want to use. We probably won't even get to that point, actually. So a little bit about me. I have a startup with my friend back there. As you see, there's a little goofy face. We also run a meetup that's based out of here as well. It's called Danbury AI. It's a little bit of a homage to I.O., but really it's just maybe a lack of imagination for the name. As I said before, I've been a full stack LAMP developer since the dark ages, but I've kind of been like a homeless developer because I haven't wanted to develop in the LAMP stack for a long time. So adopting this new stack that I'm going to talk about has really empowered me. My main interests are machine learning, NLP, adaptive learning systems, and some mathematics. That's what we do at Knowledge Exploration Systems. We do machine learning and full stack development, and also cloud stuff. Now, a little bit about you. Who's a web developer? 2, 3, 4. Okay. Who uses a JavaScript centric stack? I think I heard you saying that you're a pro. All right. Well.
Yeah. So answer the questions, or they?
No. I'm just well, I'm going to ask you guys a question.
Okay.
So who doesn't use a JavaScript centric stack that's a web developer? What do you use?
Well, Java is the backend. I mean, what we have to use web technologies in the front end, but yeah, a lot of it's Java.
What front end stuff do you use?
Just a little bit of jQuery, JavaScript, HTML, CSS.
So have you run up against any like pitfalls of that that would maybe make you transition to something else, or are your applications not so data centric?
No, I mean we would look at JavaScript or maybe something new as maybe part of the picture, but the Java part's not going to go away for us. So
Sure. All right, another polling question. What databases are we using these days?
Oracle.
Oracle? How about you?
Work, MySQL, and then personally I like to use Postgres or Mongo. Postgres with like SQLize on top of it.
Okay.
So it acts like Mongo.
Yeah.
Those ones.
Cool. I mean, we're going to be talking about Mongo today. So for those of us that aren't really into document-oriented databases, this should be something a little new. What hosting platforms do you guys use for your web applications?
Yeah.
Anyone?
AWS.
AWS?
Played with Elastic Beanstalk, stuff like that. It's pretty freaking amazing.
Hell yeah. That's what I'm going to talk about as well.
Drop a zip file in there and boom, you're done.
Yeah, for sure. And the last question, I'll skip one. Who's using TypeScript?
Just started using it a couple weeks ago. Really.
You too? How long have you been using it? I'm sorry, what's your name?
Solali.
Solali?
Yeah.
How long have you been using TypeScript?
I picked it up for an interesting project like about a year ago.
Do you still use it in production, or?
We use it in production, but actually one place we use it a little bit like unusual, I guess. It actually has a scripting language because we define the branch in Java. We have the implementation.
Yeah.
So TypeScript's kind of the glue to make sure that you're not. It's like a script, so you're not passing invalid type or something to the Java part.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Make a bridge.
Yeah, exactly. It's our bridge.
My computer is frozen.
Oh.
Brilliant.
There
Oh,
we go.
there we go. I shouldn't have put on transitions. It's just stupid. Hold on. Actually, let me get rid of that, or close some tabs here because my computer's dying. I don't know.
How much memory is in there?
8 gigs, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful thing, but I'm recording the thing. This is kind of like a trial run for this as well.
You're
Yeah.
tasking.
I should have ran it on my GPU. Fuck. All right. Let me actually just do something real quick. Slide, arrange, animation. Take this thing off. Get rid of Microsoft Word. Let's see anything else here. Microsoft OneDrive taking up 17%. Delightful. All right, we should be good now.
AWS is Elastic Beanstalk. Drop a node project in zip. You can choose your environment, and then it basically creates an instance of a machine waiting for you. Pretty slow.
Jesus Christ. All right, so LAMP. This is what it looked like. The reason why I was kind of shoehorned into it was because the environment in those days was shared hosting, and PHP and that stack was kind of permissive throughout all the service providers. PHP and the LAMP stack is well-worn territory, and it's quite reliable. PHP is often referred to as the duct tape of the internet. It has a rich open source ecosystem, including tools like PHP MyAdmin, which I've spent so much time in the past working with MySQL backends. I have a project up here on my GitHub that pretty much is a very full, robust LAMP project if you wanted to look at how things were done in that stack. So web work of old, we tended to rely on these shared hosting companies. GoDaddy, 1&1, HostGator. There was no package managers. Flash, was around. I remember putting ActionScript on my resume. It's still around, but we tend to go towards the canvas now, don't we? No Webpack, weird dependency problems, FTP instead of Git deploys, embedded SQL strings everywhere in PHP. It was pretty nasty. And I put the put the bars here because it's like, shared hosting. You can't, it's not a lot of flexibility there. I gotta press the button before. Okay. So let's talk about the stack that we're actually interested in here. So before I even go into that, I'd like to say a little bit about the cloud and the startup space. So like one thing that kind of like grinds my gears is this sentiment in the developer community where it's like, oh, the cloud is just someone else's computer. It's true, but it refers to a bunch of principles that are very different than traditional deployment. I mean, traditional development. We have things like load balancing, although yes, of course, that's in traditional stuff, but it's very easy with cloud architecture. We have things like scaling vertically and horizontally, very easy to do. Scaling vertically is that, I just right-click on my EC2 instance and I say, make it a big freaking thing. Scaling horizontally is this idea of just spinning up instances. One of the key things about cloud architecture is this idea of infrastructure as code, which kind of goes along with this DevOps principles that you may have heard of. Also, it provides pragmatic access to every type of production system you need. So this type of thing really aids continuous delivery and continuous integration, and it also follows these DevOps principles and amplifies them. And as I say here, the cloud is awesome for startups. It allows us to produce systems with no upfront investment in hardware. And I actually took this literal picture from this book. It's called the DevOps Handbook, and here's a little chart of, in the early 70s to the 80s, we had mainframes, and, if the startup, went under, there'd be a lot of catastrophe. Now, in the present, we have all these, we have the commoditization of computing resources via the cloud, and it takes much less money to actually start something up and produce some really world-class application infrastructures quite easily. So cloud computing in Node.js. So in the shared hosting environment, we typically didn't have much control over our machines. We were provided with the library, the PHP libraries or whatever, and that was it. We had to deal with it. But with cloud computing, we are the server admins. Yes, it adds a little complexity or you can use Beanstalk and have it automated for you and everything. But with EC2 instances, that's like having your own little server. You have all the control that you would have in a traditional server. But of course, it's virtualized on some big machine or machine somewhere, but that's how it acts. And Node requires a lot of packages and stuff, and it can do a lot of robust things. So it traditionally wasn't very friendly with hosting environments, although there's things like Heroku and containerized services now that have kind of bridged that gap between traditional shared hosting, like it's between shared hosting and full control. It's like the Beanstalk thing or Heroku or stuff like that. So with Node in the cloud, we can create things from API servers, web servers, to game servers that are backends to amazing products. And it's perfect for event-driven applications. That's kind of what Node is about. So JavaScript, one language to rule them all. It's like got a little Lord of the Rings thing going on here. JavaScript being the central. I mean, there's a lot of complaints about JavaScript, for sure. But being able to develop in one language on the server side and on the client side is very nice. Intellectually pleasing to me, because you don't have to keep switching to different things. And the things that emerge is you'll see like certain libraries being provided for client side and server side, and that's awesome. So you can use the same thing on client and server side. So I'm really excited about it. So here's a slide of information taken from JS stars, the sources there, and you'll have the slides and everything. And here you can see in 2016, here's a graph of projects by stars on GitHub. As you see, Vue.JS is at the top. React is under that, and Yarn is under that as well. Yarn, if anyone's not aware of it, that's a new package manager. that I think was it Facebook that put it out? Who put it out? Yeah, I think it was Facebook. But I hear Yarn is awesome. Like every time like someone talks about it, they light up. It has so many cool, innovative features that package managers like NPM don't have. I'm not even sure of the benefits, but I know that they're there. Then we have Electron. That's for actually developing JavaScript applications for desktop purposes. Then there's also this React native framework, which allows you to develop mobile applications natively. Then, of course, we have Redux, which is our key value store, Bootstrap, styling, and D3, which is an awesome visualization library for JavaScript. So yeah, JavaScript is taking over the world, really. There's definitely different languages like Python that are still that are actually also rivaling it in different domains. Like, for example, in machine learning, Python is super pervasive because it has really good interoperability with C++ and lower level languages, such that you can basically provide high level APIs to low level implementations. So it's awesome, and that's where we tend to spend a lot of our time, Python.
What's the stars business?
So that's on GitHub. That's just how many stars it has.
So I haven't paid attention.
You just click a star. It's like a like.
Basically. Oh, it's okay. You get 1 star or none. Is that the?
No, it's how many people liked your project.
Right,
that's all it is.
My point is, it's not like Netflix used to have like you rate it 3 or 4.
Oh yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You
get 1 star or not.
That's actually true. I never even thought that was confusing, but you're right. Usually a star system is based on a spectrum. Yeah, but no, it's actually just likes.
Okay.
Good question.
And when you're talking about the popularity of JavaScript, is model view controller no longer interesting if you're doing all JavaScript front and back end?
I would say no.
It's like it's
framework.
Well, what was your name again? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
John?
John, yes.
Well, what do you think about that?
I mean, model view controller is in essence still part of something like a React or like that. It's just kind of a design pattern, and like when I build a React app, yeah, I have my model, I have my database, and my view is your view and your controller are kind of right there in the same file in React. So it's kind of, but what you are still doing is really model view controller.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just a design pattern that is implemented with, you can choose your framework to work with. I mean, that's...
For sure. And I actually, it slips my mind the architecture that React and Vue is modeled after, but we're going to talk about it later. I have a slide on that stuff. Good question. So the MEVN stack. All right, this is a little bit of a weird diagram, but so for our database, using Mongo. So again, MEVN, I'm trying to make that a thing. It's a homage to mean, which is Mongo. It's the same thing, but instead of Vue, they replace it with Angular. So we have our database, Mongo. That's a document-oriented database, and it's great for working with object-oriented languages because it stores everything as objects. So when you want to load in data, typically, like when I did work in PHP, we'd have to write SQL queries and then parse that data and put it into a data structure or an object in order to then manipulate it in our program. But nowadays, with Mongo, you just get the object. It's very cool. And it's very helpful for rapid iteration, and because it's a schemaless database. And you don't have to provide a schema up front in order to store your data. And that's highly important for companies that are always changing their product. So in our agile methodology that we use, if we can call it that, Mongo is very helpful. And so instead of, so that would be the MySQL replacement in LAMP. Then the Apache replacement is Express. And I have a little thing here, which Express runs on Node. It's not its own distinct thing, which is a little confusing here. But we're using Express, well actually we're using Node as the Apache replacement, but Express actually allows Node to really function as a web server easily. Although you can do it without Express, but you'll see the benefits of that. I'm sorry, what's your name again?
John.
Do you use Express?
I do. Yeah, I love it.
Cool. Yeah, it's awesome.
You can spin up a server very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And then away you go.
For sure. And actually, there's a ton of frameworks built upon Express that allow you to do different things, which is awesome. And we'll get to all of this, hopefully. Then we have Node, which is our backend stuff. And again, it's a homage to the mean stack.
You're actually not using Apache or Nginx?
Nope. Just Node and Express.
Well, I mean, wouldn't those go in front of...
You could. Yeah. In a production system, you'd probably want to do that. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. For sure. So here's some popular JavaScript frameworks that are out there. We got Angular, we got React, we got Ember, Meteor, Vue.JS, and maybe you guys can tell me some of the complaints you have, but some of the common complaints that I've heard around is Angular, people say it's too cumbersome. It's too monolithic. With React, some people are weirded out that's attached to Facebook, and I hear that they have a weird patent clause in there. Yeah. And Meteor, Meteor is very like a full stack of opinions. So some people don't like to be locked in like that. And of course, Vue, I think the common complaint I hear now is we don't need another JavaScript framework. Come on, let's work with what we have. And I haven't really heard anything bad about this little hamster over here, Ember. Maybe he needs to lose some weight. But, yeah. They're not treating their hamster right.
Another question. So my niece is a developer back in Cleveland, and her company is they used to do Cold Fusion, and she's trying to move them over to Node.js. Is Node.js like a different animal than these other guys, or?
No. Node.js is like literally. Oh yes, of course. Actually, these are the front end frameworks.
Okay.
Node.js is the back end.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Node.js back end. These front end. And actually, if we go back to this is the front end. That's the back end. Yeah. And Express runs on Node.js, and Mongo you'll communicate with Node through. I mean, we use Mongoose, so that's one thing we use. One thing that I think is driving this transition to Vue and why it's so popular is that it has this fundamental philosophy of incremental adoption. And I think one of the most things a programmer hates is black boxes in their code that they don't understand. And the reason for it, I have a why there. The reason for it is because what is the biggest pain of a programmer? Debugging. And if there's a black box, you don't know what's happening. We've all been there, trying everything, printing out in different places. We can't figure it out. Stack traces, debuggers, and it's just so frustrating. And I think Vue and React have a very good philosophy in terms of transparency. But Angular and Meteor, I'm not sure. So I'm just saying. So MongoDB. It's a schema list, and that word looks very familiar to another word that's not very appropriate. I don't know if anyway, it's a schema. That's what I see when I see that. It's a schema-less document-oriented database useful for object-oriented applications. As I said before, it aids agile development and rapid iteration and changing requirements. It's good for prototyping systems where the data schema is not very well understood in the outset. There are downsides. Relational databases are very, very efficient for what they do, and they're based on relational algebra, and they have a hardcore mathematical foundation for why they are so efficient. So I would say, like in a really super big production system, you'd probably want to make certain parts of it, either Postgres where you add that layer on top of it, or something else, because I'm not sure. I mean, Mongo is used like crazy, but all right, that's my little soapbox there. And like I said, we use Mongoose as our API to MongoDB from Node.js. And we use something else on the front end, which I'll talk about later. So MongoDB doesn't use SQL queries. They use aggregate and find functions, which at a high level, to me, is very similar to this idea of MapReduce. So here's the MapReduce exercise. Let's try it out. So here's the thing. So the leftmost person in the row, so you're the leftmost in that row. In every row, you count the number of people in your row. Then, when you're done counting, you raise your hand. Then, in that leftmost column, when all the hands are raised, I'll point to you. You give your number back to the person behind you. You add your count to his number. And when we get to the back, we'll say the final number. So, let's do that.
So, you count people behind me?
Nope, only in your row.
Oh, okay, all right.
Including yourself.
Sorry, 3.
2.
So, but
5.
8. Yeah. So including me, so like that's MapReduce. So what we did there is on each row, I had you do a function, a count, right? Then I had a reduction in this row where it's like, okay, we aggregated our count and then we propagated it across all the counts. So, and here's a MapReduce example in Mongo. I'll just show you the picture here. So the idea is we use a query to basically limit the information that we're getting. Then we run a map, and then we do a reduce, which is like a group by. You can look at this later because I'm not trying to stress the point, but it's very interesting, the query capabilities of MongoDB. A lot of people don't really take advantage of the full thing, and actually Mike and I went to MongoDB headquarters a while ago, and there was this data scientist that showed how much logic can be removed from the front end and placed on the back end with all these queries. So it was very enlightening, and you could store queries in Mongo and everything. So Express. So as it states, it's a fast, unopinionated, minimalist framework for Node.js. It's lightweight. It has a super bleedingly simple API. It has a lot of utilities baked in with it, which make things like making APIs easy. Actually, last week I just made an API in Express for something that we were doing. It's super customizable and robust, and it has, like I say here, with most JavaScript frameworks, it has a very rich ecosystem around it that extends its functionality. And here's some that I ripped from that source. So as you can see, mean is one of them. That's where we use Angular instead of Vue. And the question that someone asked before, Sales is an MVC framework for Node, so it's still used. And even in I think it's like MMVM. When we use MMVM, we are doing something very similar to MVC, but you'll see later. I'm going to point that out.
Real handy
It's
add-on.
MEVN. I think it's MEVN. Model view model.
Yes, you're right.
Real handy add-on for that I used is Passport.
Oh yeah, hell yeah!
A fantastic add-on for authentication.
It's brilliant. The strategies that it has and everything. It's excellent. I mean, I love the whole thing. I mean, I like over the past month, I've had to like learn this stuff, so I'm relatively fresh to it. I'm not a seasoned expert in this stack, and that wasn't really meant to be the point of this talk, but it's just an introduction to this stuff. So here's some Express examples. So here is a basic web server. There you go. You in the web browser, you navigate to the root of the port that Express is listening on, and remember, Express is running on Node. Okay, so this is really a Node application. So don't get it confused. Like Express is something outside of Node. It's not. Well, depends on your semantics there, but it's a Node application. And so as you see here, basically, I use require, which is a common JS thing, which is an awesome way of managing dependencies and stuff. I get my Express reference here through app, and then I define a route, which is just a route. And then with this res object, I can send a response back to the user. And with request, with the request object, I can actually get, variables posted with by the URL from the browser. Standard get stuff. And then we listen. And you can also use middleware. Something I really like about Express is that it's super well designed, and it knows that, like, you don't necessarily want to. Well, first of all, you may want to do several different things, like when someone does a request. Like, number one, you may want to authenticate them. Use Passport. Then you may want to pass that off to another middleware that does something else. So with this, with Express, you can define a bunch of different middlewares. So like here, for example, it's the same setup at the top. And here we're defining this function, which is the same, except it has this next parameter. And that next parameter actually is called, and what that does is it passes the buck to the next middleware. And as you see here, I say app.useMyLogger, and when I do this, res.send, instead of just sending that message directly back to the browser, it actually also calls this piece of middleware. So, this is just a toy example, but you can really make some really cool applications with Express in a very pleasing way. Also, here you see that the Express application generator, you can download, you can npm install Express, it's a Node package, and you can use it to create boilerplate applications like this, where it defines all the folders and standard, structure of the project that you would typically have. And this talk is really just a light touching on all these things, not really to go into any depth, but to maybe convince some of you that haven't transitioned over to this stack that it's worth looking at. That's the objective. So Vue. All right, so we got Mongo. We got Express. Now we're on our V part. So, it's surprising. Vue was actually created by you. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. The guy's name is actually Evan Yu. I thought of that joke. I thought I'd throw it out. So Evan Yu created Vue in 2014. He was actually a Googler that worked on Angular, and this is his you can find it in that article that I have linked here. But this is what he said. I figured, what if I could just extract the part that I really liked about Angular and build something really lightweight without all the extra concepts involved? That's the thesis of Vue, and I think it really, really excels at what it's trying to accomplish. So one of the main things that Vue advertises itself as is a progressive framework for building user interfaces. So what is a progressive framework? So the thing about Vue is that it's modular. You have core Vue, which does templating and basic things you'd expect from a front end, but then you can add on all these plugins that just make a very robust ecosystem on par with Angular. And to me, as someone that had to learn this stack, this progressive nature of Vue made it very pleasing to learn, because I could go from one module to the next, and things were very self-contained. And because the modular nature, it's quite extensible, and you can swap out different parts, and people have. And there's this thing called Awesome Vue, and there's this whole repo of awesome resources for this, which at the end I have a whole slide dedicated to that. So Vue's philosophy is that a front-end framework should be modular and non-monolithic. And as I say here, it doesn't shove an opinionated stack down your throat. And it's very similar to React, its nature of binding and stuff. And it's very honest about that. It says it right up in the docs. We actually worked back and forth with React so we didn't piss them off. They did a comparison between Vue and React that you can find on their website, and they say up front, it's we wanted to make sure we wouldn't piss off the React guys because we respect them. And it's also open source, an MIT license. And the thing about Vue is that, as far as I know, it's not attached to any huge corporation. And it's kind of funded by a lot of different smaller companies that kind of just donate to the project. And to me, that's something I really like. So Angular, Google, Facebook, React. You know, there's other ones that are like Vue, but Vue, I just like it for these principles that I outline here. So Node.js. Now, the fundamental thing that Node does, well, it's a runtime environment plus a JavaScript library. That's what Node is. So Node.js allows, you know, what do I mean by a runtime environment? Well, you can run JavaScript in your browser. Your browser is a runtime environment for JavaScript. So what the creator of Node wanted to do, Ryan Dahl, in 2009, he wanted to create a runtime environment for JavaScript on the desktop for all the reasons I've discussed prior. You know, this idea of language in the front end and the back end and so on. So it's based on Chrome's V8 engine. It's highly performant, open source. It's focused on heavy I/O intensive event-driven applications, and it's very event-driven. And actually, I'll go into later why you should use promises instead of the standard event stuff. But you'll see. And I just have some modules here, you know, event emitters, blah blah blah, whatever. And then Node.js. There's just a lot of these are the packages that come with it. So promises. So because Node.js is so event-driven, you can produce disgusting code because just the nature of it. And I'll actually show you in the next slide. So promises is a concurrency primitive that makes callbacks look so much nicer. And here's the basic idea. Well, let me just show you the result actually. So this is before promises. You know, this is reading a file, doing something, you know, something asynchronously. And then here is actually using promises. And for this, we use Bluebird on Node. As you see, look how much nicer that looks. And the way that's able to do that is because first of all, when you use Bluebird, like that, well, if you know Node, you know that the fs.readFileAsync is not actually a part of that object. So what you do in Bluebird is you call this method prior to running any Bluebird stuff that promifies everything. So basically it adds these promise methods such that you can call them and return promise objects, which have basically a callback function associated with them when the asynchronous event has finished completing. And as you see here, you can have traditional looking stuff for catching errors and stuff like that. It's just beautiful. Trust me, this gets nasty very fast. And I have some applications that I wrote that you can look at before I really discovered the true way. And, you know, Billy Mays. Bless. So here's a Node example that I made that you may want to look at. And I put it here because, number one, it's kind of contemporary. Number two, it's written by a relative noob, so you should be able to understand it. It's not like any complicated conventions that I'm using. And in this particular one, what I wanted to do, I like Hacker News a lot. It's a great website for developers. And what I wanted to, what I do, I also run Danbury AI here and a Slack group for that. If anyone's interested in joining, let me know. The Slack group, it's an open group like this, so it's not like joining, but so like what I used to do is, you know, basically every article I commented on, I realized that I'd probably post to the group because it was interesting enough to comment on. So what I wrote was a Node application that basically, queried my comments page, and anytime there was a new comment, it posted this information to the webhook that I set up for this application. So if you're interested in developing, web scraping Slack applications, there's a little thing for you. Damn it. It skipped my screen. Hold on. I'll have to get a better program because this thing is like totally... Okay. Vue Essentials. Now let's talk about Vue, right? So yes, there's this MEVN. So here's the idea. You have the view. What is the view? HTML and CSS. Then you have some sort of view model, which updates the view. And the way you do that is through this data binding thing. And as you'll see in Vue, that's called like a when you associate some dynamic update stuff. You're adding it. You'll see. But the view model interacts with the model in the back end, right? And so Vue's architecture is inspired by this, and you'll see it. It's very clear when we look at an example, I think. Although we won't actually see the model back end because I'm not doing any super back end stuff. But anyway, it's inspired by the MEVN architecture. This data binding concept that you'll see in a minute provides this reactive behavior that we need for dynamic front end frameworks. Yeah. So, okay, now we're actually going to look at a piece of Vue. So this little snippet demonstrates the basic templating functionality. I think they call this text interpolation. I don't know why, but they just call it that. I'm actually, well, maybe I shouldn't tempt fate. I'll run this later. But here's the thing. So, all right. So at first, we basically fetch Vue from the CDN, the Content Delivery Network. We could have it locally if we wanted. Then we have this little div, and this paragraph with these mustache template syntax. And so that's, if you haven't heard or know about it, like this is part of like the mustache templating way of doing things. It's not exactly, it's not like the literal mustache thing, but it's like in the form of it, whatever. And so here is a script placed below that. And usually Vue, you'll see in a lot of different code, you'll see that Vue model, right? You'll see that this variable that we store this new instance of Vue in is called VN, and the reason is because this really represents the Vue model, what we're defining here. And so here we're basically defining the root element of this new Vue application, and then we're binding. This is the data parameter. We're binding message to this value. And the thing that happens is once this is done, message this area right here is bound to this variable. So whenever I change that variable, I change the content of the message thing. And I'll run some examples later. So so the one way that we can basically bind the view to the model view is through directives. So directives are prefixed with v dash to indicate that there are special attributes provided by Vue. They apply special reactive behavior to the rendered DOM, which is, again, that data binding stuff. There are three different main types of Vue directives. There's these reactive directives, which bind to a property or expression, which links the model to the view. And when the property in the model view changes, the corresponding view in the HTML will be updated. And we have a couple other Vue directives that are a little esoteric for now, but the reactive one is the most interesting. So reactive directives. So, I mean, this is kind of, I shouldn't have probably put it like this because it's like, why do I need to look at all this right now? We'll come back to it when you see an example. But these are basically different properties that Vue can attach, that you attach in the HTML in order to link the view to the model view. So we have directives. Then we also have components. So that's a big thing about Vue, is that you can split your application into several different components. And you can use this props attribute of the components in order to propagate information up the tree. So let's say if you have a component over here. That's just a little thing. I mean, I don't even want to like put it in context because I'll probably mess it up. But you can imagine having a component that's a child of another component that's a child of the root. And the idea is, if you want to, let's say if the root, you need to pass some information back up the tree, you need to pass it with the props, props entry there. But we can actually use a tool later on to manage the state as a singleton, a global singleton, that so you don't have to like do this weird propagation of information up the tree. And that's the state manager we'll talk a little bit about. So I guess I should talk about this a little bit. So, okay, this is a component. So this is the view. So, and this v4 is a reactive directive. So what this does is, and vbind here, what this does basically is it binds this to-do item tag to this data. And actually, if we append, so what the result looks like is a bunch of items in an ordered list. And if we add or subtract items from this variable, it, again, because it's data binded, it updates the view accordingly. So Vuex, that's the state management pattern that I was discussing before. So yeah, it serves as a centralized store for all the components in an application, the state of them, with different rules. It's very cool, very robust. And this is kind of the reasoning for having it that I mentioned a little bit before. It's like, why don't we, extract out the shared state information and make it global, with some rules of modifying, instead of this weird propagation thing going on. This is a big quality of life thing. What do you use for state management? I'm sorry, I forgot your name again.
I've used Redux.
Redux
on production things, and then what I've done on past for like Angular stuff, I've had to do. I have factories or services, and I use like setters and getters, from those sort of things. But on the newer projects, yeah, I've used Redux.
Cool. And yeah, like Vuex is like Redux, but specifically for Vue, and it works very well with Vue. Then we have Vue Router. So the idea here is that, and these are all the functions it provides, it's very robust. The idea is, basically, like we can define different parts of our application as different components. And what the router does is it routes HTTP calls to the corresponding component that it was that serves that function for whatever you're doing in your application. So Vue Router just is another quality of life thing. And on the bottom here you have examples and all sorts of things. Then you have Axios. This allows us to communicate with MongoDB via AJAX. So Axios, it actually runs on the back end and the front end, but we use it mainly to basically connect to Node and then run a query on Mongo. So there's a lot of stuff. And this is the best Vue resource right here. It's called Awesome Vue. It's awesome. It's cool. I'm trying to go to the next page. Okay. Webpack. So I missed a slide here because it's jumping around like crazy. Okay. Helpful supporting tools. And I'm about to wrap it up. But so Webpack is essential to use when you're developing in these modern JavaScript land stuff. So the idea here is that, you may have several libraries that you use in your web application that you install via the package manager. And the idea is when you want to move your application onto the web, you need to bundle those dependencies. And that's what Webpack does. It's a dependency a bundler. And it's awesome. And here's like an example of using Webpack to deploy. So we have our universal application code here, our routers, our components, our data store. We have an app.js, which defines the components of the application. We have a server and the client. And we use Webpack to, deploy that stuff. It's awesome, and I still need to learn more about it. And here's a really cool demo of a Vue Hacker News clone that uses Webpack, and it's super good to look at if you really want to learn Vue. Then there's required.js, and that's a module loader, which probably everyone knows about. But here's the source if you want to look at that more. Wrap up. Okay, so we'll do a little something special here. I got a T-shirt giveaway from my meetup. So the question is, what is the statistical method concerned with finding the relationship between variables? What are they called? Whoever answers first gets the T-shirt.
Regression.
Regression. Andrew gets it. All right. So.